My name is Vanessa Miller. I'm 28 years old, and if there's one thing that has defined me since childhood, it's my obsession with classic cars. While most kids spent Saturday mornings glued to cartoons, I was in my grandfather's garage, learning how to change oil, swap spark plugs, and polish chrome until it gleamed like a mirror. My grandfather, George Miller, had a saying he always repeated as we worked side by side. Cars aren't just machines, Nessie. They have souls. They carry stories. That belief stuck with me, especially when I first laid eyes on his 1969 Corvette Stingray in Rally Red. The way the light curved along its body, the throaty purr of the engine, the sheer presence of it. I was only 7, but I knew. I made a promise to myself that day. One day, I will own one just like this. It wasn't just a childish dream. It became my lifelong mission. But if Grandpa fueled that passion, my parents constantly tried to snuff it out. My mother, Diana, couldn't understand why her eldest daughter cared more about engines than dresses. She would frown at the grease under my nails and say, "Vanessa, why can't you take up painting or ballet like a normal girl?" My father, Robert, would shake his head with that mixture of confusion and disappointment that cut deeper than words. And then there was Heather, my younger sister by 4 years. To my parents, Heather could do no wrong. She was delicate, pretty, and effortlessly aligned with everything they considered proper for a young woman. When Heather wanted dance lessons, she got them. When she wanted new dresses, she received the best. When she turned 16, they threw her a party for 50 guests. I got a small cake, a card, and the reminder that money didn't grow on trees. When Heather graduated, she was gifted a brand new car. I received application fee waivers for college and a lecture about student loans. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sister. None of this was her fault. But the favoritism was impossible to ignore. The double standard became the background noise of my entire childhood. So, I made myself a promise. If no one else would invest in me, I'd invest in myself. I worked relentlessly. Through college, I juggled 3 jobs while holding a perfect GPA. I skipped vacations, parties, and luxuries. I packed my own lunches, shared cramped apartments, and poured every spare dollar into savings. When I landed a finance job in Chicago, the hours were brutal, 70-hour weeks that left me drained, but I had a goal that fueled me more than sleep ever could. While colleagues bought designer bags or traveled the world, I funneled every penny toward one thing, the Corvette. After 5 long years of sacrifice, the moment came. An authentic 1969 Rally Red Corvette Stingray, listed by a collector in Wisconsin. Price, $85,000. Exactly what I had saved. The day I drove it home, I cried behind the wheel. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "We did it, Grandpa." I swear I could feel him in the passenger seat, grinning with pride. That car wasn't just metal and paint. It was my independence, my victory over years of being dismissed, and my eternal bond with my grandfather. For 2 years, it was my joy, my sanctuary, my statement to the world, I did this. I built this life myself. But what I didn't know was that the greatest threat to my Corvette wasn't rust, thieves, or even Chicago's harsh winters. The greatest threat was my own family. Because one day, I came back from a business trip to find it gone, and when I asked my mother where it was, she sneered and said, "Thanks to your car, our daughter is having the time of her life." The words hung in the air like a slap across my face. Thanks to your car, our daughter is having the time of her life. For a moment, I couldn't even process them. I just stood there, my suitcase still in hand, staring at my mother as if she had spoken in another language. My father shifted uncomfortably in his recliner, avoiding my eyes, while my mother busied herself with a plate of cookies as though this were a casual conversation. Finally, I found my voice. "What do you mean, my car? Where is it?" My father cleared his throat and spoke in that placating tone he always used when he knew he'd crossed a line. "Now, Vanessa, don't get upset. Something came up while you were gone. Heather had an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime chance." I blinked. "What does Heather have to do with my car?" My mother's chin lifted, that same defensive posture I had known all my life. She's on a Mediterranean cruise, all her friends were going, and she was going to be left behind. "You know how hard she's been working, you wouldn't understand how stressful it is for her. We thought it was only fair to help her." My voice cracked as I said the words out loud. "You sold my car?" "It's just a car," Mom snapped, her tone laced with dismissal. "You make good money. You can always buy another one." But Heather needed this opportunity. She needed to make connections, to recover from her depression. My hands shook as I set down my suitcase. That car wasn't just a car. It was 5 years of my life. It was my connection to Grandpa. "You had no right to touch it. It's registered in my name. You committed fraud." My parents exchanged a glance. Guilty. Panicked, but still clinging to their justification. "Technically," Dad muttered, We told the buyer you had authorized us to handle the transaction. We thought it would be easier this way. Easier? I laughed bitterly, though the sound had no humor. You sold it for how much? There was hesitation. Then my father admitted, 50,000. The breath left my body. 50? My voice rose with disbelief. That car was worth 85 at minimum. Did you even bother to research, or did you just take the first offer thrown at you? The buyer said it was fair, Dad defended weakly. We needed to move quickly before you came home. It hit me like a punch. They had known what they were doing. They had rushed the sale, forging my name, spinning lies, and discarding the one thing in my life that meant more to me than words could explain. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the cookie plate against the wall. But before I could, my phone buzzed. A message from James lit up the screen, just pulled up. Where's the Stingray? And then it hit me, like a spark cutting through fog. My car wasn't missing, not really, because I remembered the plan. James and I had swapped cars the day after I left for Tokyo. My authentic 1969 Stingray was safe, locked in his climate-controlled garage. What my parents had sold wasn't my Corvette at all. It was James's replica. I started laughing, softly at first, then louder, until tears stung my eyes. My mother's face twisted with confusion and anger. What's so funny about your sister's happiness? She demanded. I wiped my tears and took a steadying breath. You didn't sell my car? My father frowned. What are you talking about? We saw you drive it here. That wasn't my Corvette, I said, the calm in my voice surprising even me. That was James's replica. You sold his car without permission, which means... I paused, letting the weight of it sink in. You didn't just betray me, you committed felony theft against him. The color drained from their faces. For the first time, they looked truly afraid. Silence filled the living room, thick and suffocating. My mother's hands trembled as she set the plate of cookies back on the table. My father swallowed hard, his usual calm demeanor cracking under the weight of what I had just revealed. James walked in from the driveway, his expression unreadable. He gave my parents the briefest nod before turning to me. Where's the car, Vanessa? I motioned toward them. Ask them. They sold it. His eyebrows lifted. They what? My father scrambled to his feet. We thought it was Vanessa's. We didn't know. James's voice cut through the room like a knife. Ignorance doesn't change the law. You forged documents, you accepted money, and you sold a vehicle that wasn't yours. That's grand theft auto. Do you know what the minimum penalty is in Illinois for a theft of this value? My mother's lips quivered. We didn't mean to. Intent doesn't matter, James snapped. His calmness was gone, replaced by sharp anger. You sold my car without consent. That's theft, plain and simple. My mother broke down, loud sobs echoing through the room. Normally, that display of tears would have triggered guilt in me. Normally, I would have rushed to comfort her. But not today, not after everything. I crossed my arms, steadying my voice. You thought you were hurting me, but you actually stole from James. And he's not your daughter, he doesn't owe you anything. My father rubbed his forehead, looking 10 years older in that moment. What happens now? My phone buzzed again, this time with an unknown number. Hesitant, I answered. Is this Vanessa Miller? A man's voice asked. Yes. Who's calling? This is Peter Donovan. I recently purchased a 1969 Corvette Stingray from your parents. There seems to be a problem with the title transfer. Can we discuss? My stomach sank, the buyer. I looked at my parents, whose faces paled instantly. Yes, Mr. Donovan, I'll call you back within the hour. I hung up and let the silence stretch before I spoke again. That was the man who bought James's replica. He's already running into issues with the title because the car isn't registered to me. It's registered to James. And once he realizes the truth, this entire thing explodes. My mother clasped her hands together desperately. Vanessa, you have to help us. Please, we never meant for this to go so far. I stared at her, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Help you? You stole from my boyfriend. You lied. You forged documents. And for what? To send Heather on a cruise she couldn't afford. To make sure she wasn't left out while I spent years working 70-hour weeks just to afford my dream? Dad's shoulders slumped. Family helps family. We thought you'd understand. I leaned forward, my eyes cold. Family doesn't mean entitlement. Family doesn't mean stealing from one child to spoil another. You've hidden behind that excuse for too long. Not anymore. James folded his arms. This isn't about family anymore. It's about the law. You committed fraud. You need to fix this before the police get involved. My mother gasped, her sobs louder. Jail? No, we can't. James's voice was hard. That's exactly where you're headed unless you undo this mess. I looked between them, letting the weight of his words sink in. For once, they had no quick excuse, no way to twist the narrative, just fear. And deep down I felt a strange, quiet satisfaction. For the first time in my life, my parents were finally facing consequences. The next morning, the weight of everything crashed down on me. I sat at James's kitchen table with a mug of untouched coffee, staring blankly at my phone. The night before had been a blur, angry words, my mother's tears, my father's silence. Now, in the cold light of day, reality felt heavier. My parents hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They had broken the law, and their actions could ruin James as well. James sat across from me, scrolling through his emails but clearly distracted. "We need a plan," he said finally. "This isn't just about the car anymore. Donovan's already suspicious. If he goes to the police before we explain, your parents could be facing charges for fraud and theft." I rubbed my temples. I don't want them in jail. As angry as I am, I can't stomach that image, but I also can't let them think they can get away with this. There have to be consequences. James leaned forward. "Then we control the narrative. We tell Donovan the truth before he finds out himself. We offer to unwind the deal. He gets his money back plus compensation, and I get my car returned. If your parents refuse, then we have no choice but to escalate legally." The thought of confronting Donovan terrified me. But James was right. It was the only path that didn't end in disaster. Before I could reply, my phone lit up with another message. From my mother. "Please, Vanessa. Don't do this. Your Aunt Sylvia says you're being selfish and ungrateful." I groaned aloud, shoving the phone across the table toward James. "They've started rallying the family against me. It's always the same script. Make me the villain, guilt me into backing down." James's jaw tightened. "That's manipulation. They're trying to corner you emotionally because they know legally they don't stand a chance." As if on cue, my phone rang again, this time Aunt Sylvia herself. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Vanessa Marie," she began in her sharp tone. "I just got off the phone with your mother. She's in tears. How dare you threaten to send your parents to jail over a car, after everything they've done for you?" I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "With all due respect, Aunt Sylvia, you don't know the full story." "I know enough," she snapped. "Your mother is distraught. Your father is sick with worry. They made a mistake, yes, but family forgives. Would it kill you to let your sister enjoy one vacation without making it about yourself?" Her words lit a fire in me. "This isn't about a vacation. They sold James's property without his permission. They forged documents. That's not a mistake. That's a felony." "Felony, schmelony," she scoffed. "You've always been too rigid, too focused on material things. Family is what matters." I nearly laughed, though there was nothing funny about it. Funny how family only seems to matter when it's me sacrificing, me losing, me being dismissed. If family truly mattered, they would have respected my boundaries years ago. There was a long pause on her end, then a click. She hung up on me. James reached across the table, taking my hand. "See? This is what they do. They twist it until you're the unreasonable one. But not this time, Vanessa. We're not letting them off the hook." I nodded, though my chest felt tight. For years, I'd endured favoritism, guilt trips, and manipulation. But now, with James beside me, I wasn't going to cave. I straightened, determination hardening in my voice. "Call Donovan. Set up a meeting. If my parents won't take responsibility, we'll make them face the consequences." James smiled grimly. "That's the spirit." For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had the upper hand. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and fresh pastries, but the tension at our table was so thick it drowned out every comforting scent. James and I sat across from Peter Donovan, the man who had unknowingly purchased James's replica Corvette. He was in his mid-40s, well-dressed but with the casual polish of someone who clearly loved cars. His eyes, however, were anything but relaxed. They were narrowed, calculating, and filled with irritation. "So let me get this straight," he said, folding his arms. "I paid $50,000 for a 1969 Stingray that turns out isn't even yours to sell. The documents were forged, the VIN doesn't match, and now I'm sitting here with what looks like a stolen car in my garage. Do you understand how that makes me look?" My chest tightened. His frustration was valid. "Mr. Donovan," I began carefully, "you're right to be upset. The truth is, the car you bought isn't mine. It belongs to James." James leaned forward, his voice steady. "And I never authorized that sale. My girlfriend's parents sold it behind our backs. They pretended to act on her behalf, but they had no right. The whole thing was fraudulent." Donovan let out a sharp laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Fraud. Great. Just great. Do you know what happens if the DMV flags this? I could be investigated for knowingly buying stolen property. That could destroy my reputation in the classic car community. I've spent years building trust with collectors, and now this." He shook his head in disgust. "All because your parents couldn't keep their hands off something that didn't belong to them." I swallowed hard. "We want to fix this. James and I have talked about it. we're prepared to refund you the entire $50,000, plus an additional $5,000 for the inconvenience, and any expenses you've already incurred. His eyes narrowed further. You're prepared, or they are? The question hung in the air like a blade. James didn't flinch. They are. The responsibility is theirs, and they will repay you. But we're here because we want to make sure you don't suffer for something you didn't do. For a long moment Donovan said nothing. He drummed his fingers on the table, clearly weighing his options. Finally he exhaled. Fine, but I want it in writing, full repayment plus the extra $5, and the money must be wired into my account before I release the car back to you. That's reasonable, James said. We'll have our lawyer draft an agreement immediately. Donovan leaned back, his expression hard. You'd better. Because if I don't see that money soon, I'll have no choice but to go to the authorities. And believe me, I won't hesitate. As we left the cafe, my hands were trembling. James squeezed my shoulder gently. You handled that well. Now it's up to your parents. The drive back to my apartment felt endless. When we finally arrived, I wasn't surprised to find my parents already waiting outside. Their faces were pale, their clothes wrinkled, as though they hadn't slept in days. My mother rushed toward me the moment I stepped out of the car. Vanessa, please, she begged, gripping my arm. Tell me you didn't go through with this meeting. I did, I said coldly, and Donovan agreed to return James's car if you pay him back. $55,000 in total. My father staggered slightly as though the number alone had struck him. 55? We can't come up with that kind of money. You should have thought of that before selling something that wasn't yours, James said firmly. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We'll find a way. Please, Vanessa, don't let this ruin us. We'll do whatever it takes. For once, I believed her. They were finally starting to understand. Actions have consequences. The living room felt more like a courtroom than a family home. James and I sat on one side of the couch, my parents on the other, their faces drawn and pale. The papers from Donovan's cafe meeting sat on the coffee table between us, stark black and white proof of the mess they had created. 55,000, my father muttered again, as if saying it enough times would somehow shrink the number. We don't have that kind of money lying around. You'll need to figure it out, James said flatly. This isn't optional. Donovan gave us a deadline. If the money isn't wired within 10 days, he goes to the police. And once the police are involved, this isn't just a family problem anymore, it's a criminal case. My mother wrung her hands, her eyes bloodshot from crying. Maybe he'd be willing to wait longer, or accept less. We could negotiate. James shook his head. No, he was clear. He wants the full amount, and he wants it quickly. If he doesn't get it, you'll be facing charges of fraud, grand theft auto, and wire fraud. Do you understand what that means? You could go to prison. The color drained from both their faces. My father finally looked at me, his voice cracking. Vanessa, please, help us. You make good money. Couldn't you cover part of it, just until we... I cut him off, my voice sharp. Absolutely not. You stole from James. You forged my signature. You rushed a sale behind my back and justified it with Heather's so-called needs. No, this is yours to fix, not mine. The room went quiet, broken only by the sound of my mother's quiet sobbing. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt resolute. My phone buzzed with a notification. A new post from Heather lit up my screen. Another photo of her on the cruise, cocktail in hand, captioned, "Living my best life." The anger surged inside me like fire. I turned the screen toward my parents. While you're sitting here panicked about going to prison, she's sipping margaritas on a luxury deck without a care in the world, and you expect me to feel sorry for her? My father groaned, pressing his hands into his face. She didn't know we sold the car. Didn't she? I snapped. She knew she couldn't afford this trip. She knew someone would have to fund it. And she's not a child anymore. She's 24, old enough to take responsibility for the mess she benefits from. James leaned forward, his eyes steady. She should contribute to repaying Donovan. After all, she's the reason you did this. My mother's head snapped up, horrified. Heather? Contribute? She's just starting her career. She can barely cover her rent. Then maybe she shouldn't be taking Mediterranean cruises, I said coldly. Actions have consequences. That includes her. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Finally, my father exhaled slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. You're right. She should help. We all should. We'll take out a home equity loan. We'll sell what we can. And Heather will contribute, too, whether she likes it or not. For the first time, I saw something new in his eyes, a flicker of accountability. James nodded. Good, that's a start. But we need more than promises. We need a legally binding agreement. My lawyer will draft one tomorrow. You'll sign it, you'll commit to repayment, and you'll make a formal apology. If you refuse... He let the silence finish the sentence. My mother gasped. A legal agreement? That seems extreme. Not as extreme as prison, James replied evenly. This is non-negotiable. I sat back, my heart pounding but steady. For once, I wasn't the child begging to be understood. I was the adult laying down the rules. And this time, they had no choice but to listen. Heather's return was anything but graceful. She arrived at my apartment 2 days later, dragging a designer suitcase behind her and wearing oversized sunglasses that did little to hide her scowl. The moment she walked in, the tension snapped like a live wire. Unbelievable, she muttered, tossing her sunglasses on the counter. I had to cut my cruise short because you're all overreacting. Do you know how humiliating it was to leave early? I stared at her in disbelief. Humiliating? Heather, our parents committed felonies to fund that trip. You were sipping cocktails while they were signing forged documents and putting their freedom at risk. She rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic. It's not like anyone died. And besides, you make enough money. You could have just covered the cruise for me in the first place. But no, you always have to make things difficult. James stood from the couch, his jaw tight. Excuse me, you think Vanessa should have paid for your vacation out of her hard-earned money? Heather smirked. She's the successful one, isn't she? Meanwhile, I've been struggling. Family's supposed to help each other. That's what Mom always says. I stepped forward, my voice trembling with fury. Family helps each other. That doesn't mean stealing. That doesn't mean forging documents. That doesn't mean sacrificing one child for another's luxuries. Do you even hear yourself? You're 24 years old, Heather, grown, yet you still act like the world owes you everything. For the first time, her smirk faltered. I didn't ask them to sell a car, she said defensively. You didn't stop them either, I shot back. You knew you couldn't afford that cruise. You knew someone would pay for it, and you didn't care who got hurt in the process as long as you got what you wanted. Heather's cheeks flushed red, but she crossed her arms and looked away. Our parents sat silently on the sofa, their faces drawn, as if they were finally realizing the monster they had helped create. James broke the silence. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to contribute to the repayment, $10,000 from your savings, effective immediately. Our lawyer is drafting a settlement agreement, and your name will be on it too. You benefited from the theft, you share responsibility for fixing it. Heather's eyes widened. 10,000? Are you insane? That's nearly all I have. Then you shouldn't have taken a trip you couldn't afford, I said firmly. Actions, consequences. You don't get to run from them forever. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of frustration, not remorse. This is so unfair. You've always been jealous of me. Mom and Dad love me more, and you can't stand it. That's what this is really about, isn't it? The room froze. Even my parents looked stunned by her outburst. I felt the breath leave my lungs, not because she was wrong, but because she had finally said the quiet part out loud. I spoke softly but with steel in my tone. You're right, they've always favored you, they've always protected you while I had to fight for every scrap of respect. But that favoritism didn't do you any favors, Heather. Look at you, 24 years old and still expecting everyone else to clean up your messes. That's not love, that's enabling. My father cleared his throat, his voice heavy with regret. Vanessa's right. We thought we were protecting you, Heather, but we were just keeping you from growing up. For once, Heather didn't have a comeback. She sat down heavily, her expression conflicted, the first cracks in her entitlement finally showing. And for the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of change on the horizon. The lawyer's office was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint scratching of a pen, as Alicia Ramirez, James's friend and an expert in criminal law, finalized the draft of our settlement agreement. My parents sat stiffly across the table. Heather slouched beside them, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. James sat next to me, his posture strong, his expression sharp with resolve. Alicia slid the stack of papers across the desk. This document outlines the repayment plan, $55,000 to be returned to Mr. Donovan within 10 days. $40,000 will come from your home equity loan, $10,000 from Heather's savings, and the remaining 5% from liquidating assets, specifically the jewelry collection Mrs. Miller offered. Additionally, this includes a notarized apology and a legally binding promise that you will never again interfere with Vanessa or James's property. My mother paled. A notarized apology? That seems excessive. Can't we just— James interrupted, his tone sharp. No. After what you did, words aren't enough. This isn't about keeping up appearances anymore. It's about accountability. You will sign that apology, and it will be on record. Otherwise, we move forward with criminal charges. The weight of his words filled the room. My father let out a weary sigh, his shoulders sagging. We'll sign it, Heather groaned. This is ridiculous. 10,000? Do you know how long it'll take me to save that up again? I turned to her, my voice cold but calm. Maybe next time you'll think before expecting someone else to fund your lifestyle. Consider it a lesson. She glared at me but said nothing more, the fight slowly draining out of her. Alicia passed the documents around. My parents signed, their hands trembling slightly as they scrawled their names. Heather signed last, each stroke of her pen looking like a personal insult. When it was my turn, I added my signature as a witness, a symbolic full stop to years of unchecked favoritism and manipulation. After everything was notarized, Alicia closed the folder and folded her hands. Congratulations, you've avoided criminal charges, for now. But let me be clear, if there's any default on this agreement, if any payment is missed, this entire arrangement collapses, and I will advise my clients to pursue full legal action. Do you understand? Yes, my father muttered, his voice barely audible. When we left the office, the afternoon sun was blinding, almost mocking in its brightness. James and I walked ahead, my parents and Heather trailing behind like defeated soldiers. Outside by the parking lot, my mother called out, "Vanessa, wait." I turned reluctantly. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, her usual confidence stripped away. "I know I've said it before, but I need you to believe me. I'm truly sorry, not just for the car but for everything, for dismissing your passions, for favoring Heather, for not protecting what mattered to you." Her words caught me off guard. For the first time, her apology didn't feel like empty performance. It sounded raw, almost broken. I softened just slightly. "It's going to take time, Mom. Forgiveness isn't instant, but acknowledging it is a start." She nodded, tears welling again. "I'll do better. I promise." Heather rolled her eyes behind her, but even she looked less certain, her arrogance dented by the reality of having to sacrifice her own money. James placed his arm around my shoulders as we walked to the car. "You did it," he whispered. "You stood up for yourself. And they finally listened." I exhaled deeply, a strange mix of exhaustion and relief washing over me. For years, I had been the strong one, the overlooked one, the one expected to carry everyone else's burdens. Now, for the first time, the balance had shifted. The battle wasn't over. But for once, it felt like I was finally winning. 1 week later, the repayment process was finally in motion. Donovan had received the first transfer from the home equity loan, and arrangements were being made for Heather's contribution. But while the money trail was slowly fixing the financial mess, the emotional fallout within my family was far more complicated. Dinner at my parents' house felt different. The house itself looked unchanged, the same photographs on the walls, the same furniture, but the energy was fragile, brittle, as if one wrong word might shatter everything. James sat beside me at the table, deliberately included this time, a silent reminder that my parents were dealing with both of us, not just me. My father served grilled chicken, his hands rougher than I remembered. He had picked up extra construction shifts on weekends to help with repayments. It was humbling to see, though part of me wondered why it had taken a crisis for him to take responsibility. Conversations started with safe topics, work, neighborhood updates, even the weather. Then Dad cleared his throat, looking at me carefully. "Your Uncle George is selling his old pickup. I was thinking, maybe you and I could work on restoring it together." The words startled me. For so long, my passion for cars had been dismissed, minimized. Hearing my father express interest in joining me felt surreal. His eyes darted away, almost embarrassed. "I know I never encouraged you before, but I want to learn, if you'll teach me." For a moment I just stared, the little girl in me screaming for the approval she had always wanted. Slowly I nodded. "I'd like that." My mother gave a small smile, one that actually looked genuine. Over the past week, therapy sessions had begun, a suggestion from Uncle George, who had stepped in to mediate after the incident. For once, Mom had been forced to confront her favoritism. She admitted, in front of a professional, that she had enabled Heather for years and dismissed me unfairly. The admission hadn't healed the wounds, but it was a start. Across the table, Heather sat quietly, an unusual look of humility on her face. Her natural brown hair had grown in where the highlights used to be, her once manicured nails now short and plain. She'd started a new job at a small advertising agency, one far less glamorous than the cruise photos she had flaunted online. For once, she didn't complain about the workload. During dinner, she looked at me and asked something I never expected. "How's work been for you, Vanessa? With the Tokyo account and all?" I blinked. "Good, busy. The Patterson contract has been intense, but it's rewarding." She nodded, almost shyly. "That's impressive. Vice President, right? I don't think I ever said congratulations." There was no sarcasm, no bitterness, just sincerity. For the first time in years, I felt like my sister actually saw me. After dinner, James and I prepared to leave. At the doorway, Mom stopped me. Her eyes were serious, her voice low. "Vanessa, I don't expect you to forgive us overnight, but I want you to know we're trying, truly. I studied her face, searching for performance, but all I saw was tired honesty. Trying is all I ask, I said softly. As we drove home in my Corvette, the familiar rumble of the engine soothed me. James glanced over, his smile gentle. They're changing, he said. It's small, but it's real. I gripped the wheel tighter. Maybe, but even if they backslide, I've learned something important. Boundaries matter, and I won't let anyone, family or not, cross mine again. For the first time in my life, I felt not just like a survivor of my family's favoritism, but like someone who had reclaimed control of the story. And that felt more powerful than any car ever could. The sun was just beginning to rise when I slid behind the wheel of my Corvette, the engine purring to life like a loyal companion. For years, this car had been my dream, my symbol of independence, and my link to my grandfather. But now, after everything that had happened, it meant something even deeper, proof that I had survived betrayal, fought for my worth, and come out stronger. I drove along Lake Michigan, the water glinting gold in the morning light, my thoughts swirling. The past few weeks had been some of the hardest of my life. Discovering my parents had sold what they thought was my car, facing Heather's entitlement, enduring guilt trips from relatives, negotiating with Donovan, and sitting across from my parents in a lawyer's office while they admitted to crimes. Yet here I was, still standing. No, stronger than before. When I pulled back into my apartment complex, James was waiting outside, leaning casually against his sedan. He smiled when he saw me, and for a moment the weight of everything lifted. He had been my rock through all of this, steady and unflinching when my world spun out of control. "How was the drive?" he asked, opening the door for me as I stepped out. "Peaceful," I said, exhaling. Like closure, we carried takeout coffees up to my apartment, and as we sat on the balcony overlooking the city, I thought back on everything we had been through. My parents had repaid Donovan in full, even Heather contributing reluctantly. The notarized apology sat framed in James's office, a permanent reminder of the line they had crossed, and the promise never to cross it again. The family therapy sessions had continued too. It wasn't easy, old habits didn't vanish overnight. My mother still slipped into defensiveness, Heather still showed flashes of entitlement, and my father still struggled to voice his feelings. But for the first time, they were trying. That alone was a victory I hadn't dared to hope for. One evening at dinner, Dad had said something that stuck with me. We thought protecting Heather was love, but it wasn't. It was fear of her failing. And in the process, we failed you. But we're learning now. That admission cracked something open inside me. For so long I had waited for acknowledgement, for someone to say out loud that the favoritism wasn't in my head. Hearing it from my father felt like balm on an old wound. Heather, too, had surprised me. She started taking her job seriously, even calling me one night for advice about handling a difficult client. Her pride was still there, but it was tempered now, mixed with something new, humility. For the first time in years, I saw the possibility of a real relationship with her. As I sipped my coffee, James nudged me gently. "Do you regret how we handled it?" he asked. I shook my head. No, it would have been easier to let it slide, to forgive without consequences. But that would have just repeated the same cycle. They needed to feel the weight of their actions, and I needed to prove to myself that I could stand firm, even against my own family. James smiled, squeezing my hand. "That's why I admire you. You didn't just protect a car, you protected yourself." I looked out at the city skyline, the Corvette gleaming in the parking lot below. Maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. The car was never just about the metal or the engine. It was about valuing myself, refusing to be dismissed, and honoring the boundaries I set. And now, it's not just a car, it's a reminder that I'm worth protecting too. The breeze carried the faint sound of traffic, life moving forward. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sometimes the things we fight hardest for aren't possessions at all. They're respect, boundaries, and the courage to say, this is who I am and this is where I draw the line. And that, I realized, was truly priceless.